Is my baby ready for solids? Because we're going to introduce a very special little person to this whole podcast series on weaning.
Kyla is my little daughter. So far has just been having milk feeds.
Is she ready, and how do you know is she ready? What is really important to remember is that solids is not a solution for poor weight gain. Solids is not a solution to poor sleep. So if they're getting enough nutrition through their milk and they're not sleeping well, then there might be other factors involved. With regards to her readiness from a developmental point of view for knowing when to start solids and when to approach me and say, okay, Kath, I think she's ready. What made you think that?
Was eating lunch and she actually took the plate and pulled it towards herself. But you could just see her growing interest in, what is mom and dad eating? The important thing to realize is when starting solids, they are learning a new oral motor pattern. So they need to learn what to do with the food. Your solid journey in the beginning is actually just about exposure. Little ones are still getting the majority of their nutrition from their milk. So it actually doesn't matter if it's not going in.
And remember, your gut instinct is one of the best ways to determine if your baby is ready for solids. Hi everyone, and welcome to Let's Talk Baby. And we're in almost the end of January 2024. Can you believe it? And I'm so excited to be here today again with you. I'm Kath Megaw. I'm a pediatric dietitian, passionate about children developing a healthy relationship with feeding and to make this journey as easy for you as moms as possible and as fun as possible. And I'm joined by my co-host, Sammy. Hi, Sammy.
Hi, Kath. Thanks so much for having me again.
Oh, it's always lovely doing this together.
Yeah.
So today we've got a really exciting topic, moms. We're looking at, is my baby ready for solids? And it's probably a question I can guarantee you that every parent will ask. And so today we want to give you some guidelines as how you can assess if your baby is ready, because that's really important. So we're going to start with Sammy, because we're going to introduce a very special little person to this whole podcast series on weaning. And I'm going to let Sammy introduce her to us. And she's going to go along this journey with us to help you how to wean your baby successfully onto food.
Absolutely. I think the timing, Kath, has been great because as we've launched the series, it goes right into where Kyla is in her journey. And I think in previous podcasts, those who have been following us for a while have actually been through the pregnancy journey, and so they might know of little Kyla already. But those who don't know, Kyla is my little daughter, and she is going on to 5 months at the moment, and so far has just been having milk feeds. And she is on a very special milk called Neocate, and we'll touch onto that journey in a different podcast and why she's on Neocate. But at the moment, we obviously are sitting with a big question of, is Kyla ready to start solids? And, what are the different types of things that we need to look out for to determine whether she is actually ready to start? So we're at that exciting stage now as well with her. So I'm very excited to have her journey along with us in the podcast and for us to share her weaning journey with all of our followers.
Oh, so exciting. And that's such a good question. Like, is she ready? And how do you know, is she ready? And there's been a lot of different information out there over the years. I think it's settled down a little bit, and I don't find it such a confusing area at the moment. But most people will agree, most healthcare professionals agree on the fact now that you can wean babies safely between the ages of 4 and 6 months. The World Health Organization is still recommending 6 months and waiting to 6 months, and that's because the World Health Organization works into a lot of developing countries, and in those countries, it is protective to wait a bit longer to introduce solids because breast milk is a very good source of nutrition for those children in those developing countries who don't have a lot of access to solid foods and a good variety of solid foods. So the longer baby can be breastfed, the better. Whereas in a developed country, in good economic structures, it's totally safe and appropriate to wean your baby between 4 and 6 months. So I think if Kyla is between 4 and 6 months, I would say yes, you can definitely go ahead. And she's 5 months, so I think 5 months today. Yeah. So it's totally safe from an age point of view to start the weaning journey with her, which is great. The other thing that I always say from a nutritional point of view, what is really important to remember is that solids is not a solution for poor weight gain. So we don't introduce solids to babies because they're not growing well. We must rather up their milk intake. Solids is not a solution to poor sleep, because what we want to do is make sure they get enough nutrition. If they get enough nutrition from their milk in the beginning, they will then have enough nutrition to enable them to sleep through the night. So if they get in enough nutrition through their milk and they're not sleeping well, then there might be other factors involved. But it's not starting solids that's going to solve that problem. Not in the beginning, because solids, as you will hear during these podcasts, it's about the introduction, is about learning how to eat. So it's not for that reason you would start solids. And the third reason not to start solids is for reflux. So you don't start solids to try and sort out reflux. Okay, so if you remember those are not good reasons to start solids. The reason you start solids is because your baby is developmentally ready. It's important to get the solid journey going so that they learn how to feed and how to eat. And we want them to eventually, obviously, go onto a full food diet and be weaned off milk in the next year or 2 or 3. And so in order to have that happen, we need to start them gently, and we do that between 4 and 6 months. So in light of that, Sammy, what would you say as a feed-in therapist? Now put your feed-in therapist hat on and not just your mom hat. What signs have you particularly been looking at with your little girl with regards to her readiness from a developmental point of view for knowing when to start solids and when to approach me and say, okay, Kath, I think she's ready? What made you think that?
So again, from the mommy side of things, and then also just from what I advise the little ones that I see, because that's a big question that I often get asked as well, is when is my little one ready to start solids? And I think it's quite important. You touched on, the age range. So you might find that some babies are ready at 4 months, and you might find that some babies are ready only at 6 months. So it's really important to keep an eye on these signs of readiness. A big one is your little one showing interest in food. So it's actually quite amazing how you start seeing how they notice you eating. So if you are having a meal or a snack, they'll all of a sudden zone into that, and they'll be very focused and watching what you are eating. They might even, put their arm out or their hand out and try and grab it from you. I had an instance where Kyla was sitting on my lap while I was eating lunch, and she actually took the plate and pulled it towards herself. Luckily, we averted a very big mess, but you could just see her growing interest in, what is mom and dad eating? This looks interesting. So, as before, pre-4 months, she didn't really pay much attention to what others were eating. It was just her focuses on the bottle. So now she's showing a lot of interest. So that's one of our main signs. There's also a little bit of a misconception in terms of the sign of your baby needs to be able to sit. So a lot of guidance will say, no, your baby needs to sit independently, which is not true, because babies generally only start sitting independently from 6 months. So, you have babies that are showing great readiness cues, other cues, but they're not sitting independently. So parents are not starting with solids because solely for that reason. And the important thing is that a baby is able to sit, because we don't want them flopping over when they're trying to swallow, because obviously that's a risk of choking and for baby safety. But you want them to be able to sit supported. That's important. So if baby is able to sit next to you or in between your legs and have a little bit of support, even in a high chair, and you put a roll around them, that is totally fine. You just don't want them to be flopping over. We want some head and neck control. That is very important for safe feeding. And then the other cues are, you can see, this is sort of my areas, the oral motor. So we also started to notice like a change in Kyla's oral motor pattern. So one of the main things was she was putting things in her mouth, and you could see she was mouthing a lot of toys. We gave her a nice little silicone spoon just to get her used to it, obviously with nothing on it. But just watch what she was doing, and you could see how her oral motor skills were advancing. It wasn't just put something in her mouth and suck. She was now moving it from side to side, and she was getting more of a adult-like oral motor pattern, which is obviously what we want for eating. It's important. And so we could just see those maturing in her oral motor skills, which was great. And yeah, those are mainly, the being able to sit supported, showing the interest in food, being the right age. Those are normally your sort of your top signs to look out for. And those are your reasons to start solids.
And then I know one thing sometimes people get a bit confused about is the tongue thrust reflex. And,
yes.
From my side, I've always said to parents, babies are going to have that reflex there when you start solids. The fact that it's there doesn't mean you mustn't start solids. So I don't know if you want to just briefly give us just a little bit of a insight into that, because I think it's sometimes also just like the sit-in, it's also misunderstood and can also sometimes delay babies.
Yeah. So the tongue thrust is a completely normal oral motor pattern, and majority of babies have it. The important thing to realize is when starting solids, they are learning a new oral motor pattern. So they need to learn what to do with the food. And so initially we find that when we are giving a baby puree, you'll notice the tongue will almost thrust, like you say. And that doesn't mean that they don't like it, and it doesn't mean that they're not ready to start solids. It just means that they need more practice. And we'll also again touch on different textures and where you're heading in terms of oral motor development. But a tongue thrust is definitely, it's almost also like a bit of a protective mechanism. So something's new in my mouth, I'm not quite sure what it is, let me thrust it out. And then some babies that we've seen just that is their motor pattern. So unless they've got a bottle in their mouth, they'll just thrust it out. So maybe not intentionally, but it's actually even more reason, again, if all the other readiness cues are there, it's even more of a reason to start solids, because we want to get that motor pattern to become a little bit more advanced.
Yeah, I love that. And that's exactly what happens. It looks quite hectic, that first kind of few bits of puree, and then the next minute it suddenly starts to disappear because they practice. And if they don't practice it, it's not just going to disappear.
It's a skill, that they need to learn. And with everything gets better with practice. And I think, like you touched on in the beginning, it's also important to remember, because I think some parents panic when they see the tongue thrusting, because they're saying, oh, but my child's not getting anything in. And you touched on it at the introduction, is that the majority of your solid journey in the beginning is actually just about exposure. Little ones are still getting the majority of their nutrition from their milk. So it actually doesn't matter if it's not going in. And it doesn't mean, like we said, it doesn't mean that they're not ready and that they may be failing at having solids. That's not what it's about in the beginning.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think just to reinforce that, is it really is about their developmental journey and their process of learning how to eat, and also just that it's fun. I think we forget about that, but it needs to be fun. And if you sit in listening to this and going, I wonder, my child, if they're ready, if they're showing us these cues, make sure that from 4 months, even from 3.5 months, start eating consciously around them, because they kind of watch and learn by looking at what you do. And they see the enjoyment you have in the food and the fun you have in with food, and it kind of draws them in to that eating space, which I think is so wonderful. And that is how you're going to definitely notice the cue of my baby showing interest in food, and also have them around food cooking in the home and let them get those smells, because we'll talk about it in future podcasts, just about taste development and how important it is that they are around those smells of good food cooking. So those are really important. And then just before I end this, I just want to touch on the prem baby, because I know that's sometimes very confusing for a parent. Like, if I have a prem baby, when do I start solids? And you and I are both passionate about prems, and that's actually how we started our journey together in the neonatal ICU. So I think what is really important, which I say, and then you can just add what you feel, but is that you look at your baby developmentally, and we allow prems a lot of grace for development. So we allow prems to kind of go and develop at their corrected age and not necessarily their actual age. So in other words, their corrected age as if they had been born full term. And we do the same when it comes to solids. So that might mean if your baby was born 2 months prem and they're now 6 months old, but technically are actually really 4 months mature, that is then when you would look at more starting the solid journey based on that. And that's because of these developmental things that you, Sammy, have mentioned. And I think that takes pressure off as well. And then, again, your baby's individual. So depending also how prem they were, how hectic their prem journey was, will also determine roundabout when you take that solid start into account. And so obviously the younger, the more premature they were, the more you will wait till they catch up developmentally. Not the closer to their term date, you might then just kind of start around the time of when they would be ready. So I don't know if you want to add anything before I just wrap up.
Yeah, Kath, I think it is so important. And I mean, obviously this is with specific to solids and weaning, but it's a huge emphasis that we make with our preemies, is that in terms of all their developmental areas is to take into account actual age versus corrected age, because it can make a big difference. And yes, some prem babies will meet these milestones or be ready for solids at their actual age. But then other preemies, like you say, depending on their journey, might not be ready and only be ready closer to their corrected age. And that might be corrected age 6 months. And then they are actually, if they were born 2 months prem, they're actually 8 months. And I think that's very important, because I think there can be quite a lot of pressure, outside pressure on prem parents. Your child is this old, why are they not starting solids? And I think, prem parents can be rest assured that the research is there, and that our little preemies need a little bit more extra time. So, if they're not showing these cues that we've spoken about when they are between 4 and 6 months actual age, look at their corrected age and maybe just go from there and use that as their hallmark. So I think it's really important.
Yeah, I love that. So moms and dads and all of you who are getting ready, I hope this has brought some good insight into, is my baby ready for solids? And just to recap, what you want to look at is your baby showing some interest in food? Are they between the ages of 4 and 6 months? If your baby's born prem, we would advise you to consider corrected age based on their development. Can they sit supported? They don't have to sit unsupported, but they must be able to at least just hold their head up, which just makes the feeding journey a bit easier. Have they shown some change in their oral motor development? But it doesn't have to mean no tongue thrust, because that's going to be present, as Sammy said. And and I think that those are the key things that you really want to have a look and you want to see. And you will then be able to determine, is my baby ready? And remember, your gut instinct and your mom instinct and dad instinct is one of the best ways to determine if your baby is ready for solids. So these are the guidelines we've given you. And like Sammy said, that window period between 4 and 6 months is totally up to you as a parent to determine whether your baby is ready. So we look so forward to you joining us for this journey that we're going to be going on. We're going to be going on it with little Kyla, who will be starting solids very soon. And we're both so excited about that. And keep us posted on your little one's journey. And we look forward to journeying this with you. You can follow us on Instagram. We've got Let's Talk Baby on Instagram. We've also got Sammy's Instagram page. We'll put everything below. We've got NutriPete's Instagram page, and Dr. Jenny Rose, who couldn't be with us today, one of our other co-hosts, but she'll be joining us along this journey, which is going to be so invaluable. Her contact details will also be there. So thank you so much, and we look forward to the next one. Thanks, Sammy.
Thanks, everybody. And just reach out. If you're not sure of anything or you just want to double check, reach out. We'll be happy to respond to you guys to help you out. Thanks so much, Kath. Looking forward to the next one.